G'day, ZiggyD here with some Path of Exile news. In this video I'm going to give you guys a quick summary of the patch 1.2.3 which was just announced and is going to be coming out this Monday New Zealand time. This is just a minor patch, it doesn't include any new skills, but it does have some pretty significant rebalances and things that you should be aware of if you're going to be playing Path of Exile in the new patch. So the first is that the Haku Master Missions have been reworked greatly. A lot of things are going to be changing with this, too many to list in this video, so just be aware that if you're going to be jumping into the Haku Armor Master missions, that they're going to be completely different in a lot of areas. Some of the nasty things have been rebalanced and some other new nasty things have been added, so it's going to be a bit of a mixed bag, and maybe I would be a little bit cautious the first couple days just to make sure that everything is balanced nicely, because you know whenever something new like this is implemented, people tend to rip. Next up, the Vagan duels have also been rebalanced. He has some new ally types appearing in some of his duels, and probably most scarily, before one of his duels he'll now actually have traps set in his arena before the match even begins, so you won't see where he puts the traps. So I'm a little bit afraid of that one, because if they're bear traps, you know, I play an evasion character, could be a bit of a problem, so keep an eye out for those. Vorici's also seen a little bit of a change, kind of just an interesting kind of sad one, is that the missions where the exile is now supposed to survive, so you're supposed to leave the exile alive at the end of the mission, so that's the ones where you either get them to low life or you kill all their guards. These ones now, they actually escape afterwards, so no more free exile kills after the mission. Makes sense, it was kind of dumb that you were supposed to keep them alive, that you would end up killing them anyway after the mission completed. So that has now changed, and they now, I guess, portal away or something. The other master change to know about is that Elreon has been rebalanced a little bit, and a lot of his waves will now include magic monsters, rare monsters, and even some bosses. So this is a pretty good change, I think. Elreon's been a bit of a joke most of the time. You kind of just stand there and farm free XP and loot. But now they're actually going to throw in some rares and a couple bosses in there as well, so things should get a little bit more interesting. They also reduced the number of totems that you have to defend to 1 in that particular type of mission as well. Next up, Cartographer lockboxes have been nerfed again. There was a bit of double dipping that the devs didn't intend on going on with those, to do with map bonuses and party bonuses. So now the most important thing to know is that the number of members in your party do not affect the map drops anymore. So I know people were bringing people in, then re-rolling the lockbox to get the bonus item quantity. So now that does no longer apply, so there's no reason to bring extra people in your party if you find a Cartographer's lockbox. On the skill rebalances side, the most significant one to know about is that Herald of Ice's secondary on shatter damage, so the explosion, the ice nova, has had its damage literally doubled. They doubled it. So that should be more interesting to actually create builds around now. It kind of makes sense that they're changing this, because Herald of Ash has been something that the devs were really excited to see builds made around this aura, but Herald of Ice was kind of just added damage. The explosion wasn't really strong enough to actually build around, but now with that damage actually doubling, it should be an interesting thing that you can potentially build your character around now, kind of like what people have been doing with Ice Shot, Herald of Ash Prolif. I don't know exactly how strong it could be, but we may see some builds arise out of that, or at the very least, if you're using that particular buff, it's going to be a little bit stronger now. Another change that I'm a pretty big fan of is the change to invasion mobs. A lot of people have been sort of discussing the topic that the new invasion feature, or the guest mobs, kind of ruin the theme and the flavor of a lot of the zones. You just get devourers everywhere, or you get charging rowers everywhere, and you lose kind of that flavor of the zones. You know what to expect in each of these zones, and you know, I was on that side of the fence as well. I thought it was a bit of a shame that invasion monsters were so prevalent. Well, the devs have been listening to this, and they've lowered the amount of guest monsters that can appear relative to the signature monsters of the zone, so we should be seeing a lot less invasion monsters. There will still be the occasional devourers in zones where they're not supposed to spawn, but there should be less of them, so it seems like a pretty good change and maybe a nice balance overall. Now, the final and most contentious and hot topic changes of this patch, and this is what everyone's been talking about, has been the crafting changes. Firstly, the Of Flaring mod, which is the flat fizz damage mod for weapons, has been increased in rarity. It was actually way more easier to get than the devs thought it should be, relative to the power of weapons that you could craft with it under the new crafting system, so that'll be a lot harder to get. If you want to try and ult for that, you'll want to do that before the new patch, because it's going to be significantly harder to get after the new patch drops. On top of that, the Elreon signature feature mod of crafting, which allows multiple master crafted mods, so items can have more than one master crafted mod, has been changed. Its cost has been moved from 1 divine to 2 exalts, so that's a big increase in the cost. Carl commented on the forum saying that this wasn't about rebalancing the power of this, it was just about changing the availability of this type of weapon crafting. So it's still going to be available, but it's not going to be available until much later on. So there's been a lot of discussion about this change overall, a lot about the price especially, or about limiting the availability of something like this that allowed people to much more easily craft really good endgame weapons. And the quality of weapons was pretty damn good for this, and the price at which they could be crafted was really cheap. I know I don't think anyone really expected this to not change. I think most people saw this coming. I definitely expected, you know, we talked about this on I think 2 of the podcasts, saying that we feel this is probably going to be changed. Like, this is pretty insane, the level of weapons that can be crafted with this particular mod. So it's a bit unsurprising. However, the actual change to the price, or the price that they went with of 2 exalts, seems a little bit interesting. Just more for the fact that they actually made it cost exalts. Now, I thought a better solution for this would have been to make it cost something like 50 chaos or 60 chaos. So giving it a similar price to what exalts are currently worth in most economies, but in chaos instead. The reason for this is there's no real way to generate exalts in the game. They just drop, and if you're lucky they drop, and they drop pretty infrequently for most players, especially self-found players. However, chaos orbs can be produced through the chaos vendor recipe, so this is something a self-found player can work towards with, you know, actual, you know, steps. They can see each chaos. You know, if I get a full set of rares, I get a chaos. And that would have also helped to boost the relative value of Chaos Orbs, because exalts have been inflating at a pretty rapid rate in general, and this is only going to push that a little bit further. Now, an interesting side effect of the early release of these patch notes and this particular change has been that divines have gone from like 6 Chaos to selling for over 20 Chaos, because people want to get in and craft this before the change, because it's still going to be much cheaper, even with divines costing that ridiculous amount. So if you've got some divines you might want to offload, now's probably a good time to do that. As with any financial advice in these games, do your own research. But the other thing is that the value of exalts, if this change does go through, will increase more and more after the patch. So I expect exalts to be reaching all-time highs. They've already been at all-time highs in terms of chaos value, and that should, you know, there's no sort of end in sight for how valuable they're going to get. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with this on Monday, whether the devs end up changing this again, or whether the exalts change goes through, and what impacts that has. It'll also be interesting to hear, you know, next week what ZiggyD's sort of reasoning for make it exalts was. Obviously to make it a bit harder to achieve, but why not make it something like chaos or multiple divines or something like that? So hopefully we'll get some interesting feedback or some interesting information on that. Anyway, I'd like to hear what you guys have to say about these changes. What do you think about the crafting changes? What do you think about any of the other patch changes? But anyway, that's it for now. I'm ZiggyD, and thanks for watching.